I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. Start with a roll call. McKee here, Lanterman.
Here.
Bottoman.
Present.
Varenkamp.
Here.
Nichols.
Here.
Alrighty, and this is a work session. We will get right into it for the sketch plan for the Oswald Business Park at 19510 County Road 30. And who's handling this one?
Mr. Mayor, I can briefly give an update. This was a work session called by the council, and staff simply provided some background information about actions to date. The applicant is here tonight and does have a few slides, some of which were in your packet, which show the evolution of the site plan in more detail. They're here to answer questions, and the landowner is here as well. And we're happy to answer any questions as staff as well, but don't have a presentation prepared.
Okay. Any initial questions off the bat, or we can get started with the applicant? If you could just state your name and address for the record. And
Connor McCarthy, United Properties, 250 Nicollet Mall, Minneapolis. Well, hi again. We've met. I'll just jump right into it. I've got a few slides, and I don't plan on doing much of a presentation. It's more of a guide to open a discussion. I don't think I'll accomplish anything by just talking at you tonight. So if you move to the first slide here, this is what I'm going to briefly talk about. Evolution of the plan, where we were when we first met with the Oswald family, and the first plan we put together 12 months later, 10 months later, technically where we are today on our planning, and how we've incorporated feedback. Talk about a little bit of a deeper dive into our current plan, and then kind of into zoning to a discussion. So here's our first plan. This is the first plan we created with our consultant team after reviewing the zoning code. These were much more distribution-centric buildings with trailer parking in between the buildings, nearly 1 million feet of development, and much larger buildings. The largest building here is, I think, 440,000 feet, and depths of 310 to 320 feet. These are truly distribution deep bay buildings. Fast forward to our next plan. Right after our first conversation with city staff, we learned that just wasn't going to fly. This was never intended to be a distribution-centric site. Business Park was intended more for what we believed, and staff, in my opinion, believed, buildings such as this. So we've incorporated a public plaza, a connection road up to the north and to the east per some recommendations, a trail on the north side of the property, and shrunk the buildings, removed trailer parking, thought this would be more of a business park style buildings. Fast forward again, we've reduced the overall size of development. We've met with Hunter's Ridge and shifted the trail southward, away from the property line to satisfy those residents, and added additional public plaza space. So as you can see, this is now June of 24. From I think October to June, a fairly sizable change in plan. And then fast forward, I believe, to the plan that's most recent as of today. The only difference here being that between the middle two buildings, we've corrected the setback issues to now comply with what the city code was intended to do. So
That's actually not the only change. You also deleted 232 loading docks, according to the packet I received.
these buildings would only have 15 to 20 loading docks total, so this plan would only have...
Can you go back one slide?
But I think that was a confusion, Mark. And again, everybody was set that this was a distribution, and the lines that were there.
But there are loading docks there.
No, the lines that were there were representative parking spots for cars and those kind of things. And he had made the comment that there wasn't, they weren't full-blown loading docks on the backside.
Why
of the
does it say truck docks?
So,
Is that a mistake too?
no, there are truck docks in these buildings. There's not trailer parking. So the difference being the truck docks allow, businesses to load product in and out of their facility. The trailer parking allows for them to store their trailers, their 52-foot semi-trailers on the property overnight, and that's been entirely eliminated from this
Right,
plan.
but you had said that that was the only change, and it wasn't. You also removed, I
It was
think,
removed at one point.
232 truck docks.
It was removed at one point in this process, yes.
I misunderstood then, sorry.
So, I mean, there were lines representing, so I maybe still don't understand. But I'll move forward here to the next slide. So this is maybe can help answer that question. After our first staff meeting and the first council meeting with you all, somebody spoke about those lines on the plan showing where the docks would be. And they seemed to look like trailer parking areas. They weren't intended to be that. And so we've removed those lines from the plan, but never really intended to have trailer parking in the plan. So to clarify, that was removed. And so after that, we then met with Hope Church, Hunters Ridge, and the Bellwether community. And I can say in the 9 years I've been doing this, I've never once had 3 different neighboring groups actually be somewhat supportive of the project.
Can I jump in again? I spoke with Brian Lothar of Hope Church, and he told me that he was not putting his support behind this project. I met with the neighborhood up on Hunters Ridge and in Bellwether, and I spoke with several dozen people there who told me that this project was described to them as petite.
Petite.
Yes, and they all use the same word, which I thought was interesting.
I was there too.
Sure. So I'm sure, well, I see some Hunters Ridge folks, I see a representative of the church, and maybe they can speak to that if that's appropriate, but.
I just don't want it represented as though Hope Church is for this or the neighbors there are for this, because not a single neighbor I spoke with was, once they understood how large this was, were they supportive.
You know, this is it'll lead to the crux of why we're here today, which is the zoning designation of the property. And I think what each of these neighbors have expressed to me is that through responsible development and thoughtful development, they would support a project that does that. I mean, there's ways to develop that are more thoughtful than others, and I think that's what was respected about what our team has accomplished. So, to the next slide, I wanted to just give, you know, here's our current plan. It's 4 buildings in total. It's 670,000 square feet, with buildings that are 200 feet to 220 feet deep. A large change from where we started. And the buildings size range from 160 to 176,000 square feet. And I do have a couple of examples of projects that I've worked on that I've got some imagery and examples of the tenants that occupy them, so we can talk about some of the more details behind this today. But these buildings have removed the trailer parking. They have shortened the depth, which is much more conducive to natural lighting for production space, for manufacturing space, for office space to be built out in these buildings than the deep bay warehouses that you see up in Dayton and Rogers.
How many truck docks?
Physical docks, we typically average 1 to 1.5 per bay per building. So like I said, probably 15 to 20 docks per building. So 60 to 80 docks in this plan.
But they're not illustrated here.
Well, you have to understand that this is from a bird's eye view, and the docks are on.
I get that, but they were
walls.
on your last application. It says truck docks. And then on this new plan, you deleted all of the truck docks, but now you just said that there are truck docks.
There
But
are, and
but they're
there-
not here.
You know, with all due respect, there's a gross misunderstanding of what I'm trying to explain to you, which is that there are and always have been truck docks. It's the lines that were, at this council meeting, there was a complaint about how those lines looked as far as representing trailer parking, in my understanding. And so we removed those because of that comment. But there are docks on these buildings, yes. on one side of each building.
You did reduce the count though, which is good, I think, because the
Yeah.
previous plan showed, I think, 58 or so per building.
Sure.
So you've cut
Yeah.
that by more than half.
Yeah, right.
At the last meeting, I know you were asked for the ratio of office space versus distribution/trucking. I don't see that ratio in the new application. Do you have a ratio you can share with us?
So we don't have a new application. And if you want to fast forward to the Brooklyn Park example of projects, I'll come back to this because
Okay, but so you don't have a ratio?
I can speak to it through example, and so the next slide has some of that. So these are buildings that me and United Properties have developed in the last 3 years. These are projects located at the southwest corner of Highway 610 and 169, not that far from here. We're probably all have driven by it and are familiar with it. These buildings range in size from 110,000 feet to 201,000 feet. These buildings represented a tax base increase to the city of Brooklyn Park from $100,000 to $5 million. These buildings represented over 1,000 jobs created to the community and 7 headquarters. And this was once high-density mixed-use land in Brooklyn Park that was not suitable with its zoning district and was created and rezoned into business park for this use. And this is Cretex, a medical manufacturer, home to over 300 employees. Tesla, manufacturer. Minneapolis Glass, a manufacturer. And on the other side of the highway, Worth Adams and Nilfisk, other manufacturing headquarters to the community. And so your question about how these buildings break down, I can speak to each one of these. I know them like the back of my hand. Cretex has 2 stories of mezzanine office, over 80,000 square feet of office in that building. The rest is high-tech clean room manufacturing. Tesla is manufacturing the robots that put the cars together. There's probably 20,000 feet of office in that 120,000 foot building, and most of the rest of the space is manufacturing. Now, all these have different balances. You know, there's a tenant in here, Clearfield, on the south side of that building. That probably has more warehouse space than others, but it's all a balance, it's market receptive, and these tenants all run their businesses differently.
You're aware that 610 is a state highway and 169 is a national highway, right?
What's the purpose?
Well, they're not county roads,
Right.
and there are no neighborhoods around them.
Sure, yeah. I guess I recognize that. So to answer your question, Councilmember Lanterman, these are the tenants that we intend to attract to a business park like this. And this is the intent of what I believe, at least how my interpretation of the way the city code reads. If we fast forward to the last slide, which is, I think, the crux of the issue here today, I've typed out forward to there we go. The intent of this district is to provide for the establishment of campus developments for a variety of office, low-impact manufacturing, or assembly of a variety of products that create no noise, glare, or fumes. Uses in this district are limited to those that are compatible with lower intensity residential and business uses, which have limited amounts of outdoor storage. Our project has no outside storage. Our project, in my interpretation, and I think why we're here is to discuss our interpretation of this, is that our project is less intrusive than what the description of that zoning district allows for. And then in its permitted uses, manufacturing and assembly of products, office and warehouse, warehousing and storage indoors used in conjunction with offices and manufacturing, laboratories and research facilities, and wholesale showrooms. Now, I think, based on what we've accomplished in Brooklyn Park in that example and what we're showing on our concept plan, is that all of those would comply with what the intent of this code is. Now, I think I'll pause and I'll receive feedback, and maybe I'll even sit down and allow the conversation to occur amongst the group. But I'd love to hear the difference in understanding between this, because for everybody's sake here, we've got a zoning code that is very much directed towards the type of uses we propose for. We've got a landowner that's attracted us, a developer, a qualified developer based here in the Twin Cities to develop a product that complies with the code, and we're being told not to continue. And so we'd like to know why, we'd like to talk about a plan, we'd like to understand if there are things we can massage here and there to get support, because we don't wanna just come in and plop something down that you all don't like. But, we're here to talk about the details behind this. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone want to start us out with some thoughts or questions for the applicant or for staff or for the landowners?
Nope.
Jeremy, Dean, John.
I think it's important to separate what we wish the comp plan said from what the comp plan actually does say. So part of what the comp plan says is we have a business park zone. We want, within the comp plan, a certain kind of development to occur inside that zone. This isn't the time to change the comp plan. We can adjust the zoning code if we feel like there are practical things that would allow us to distinguish between desirable business development and undesirable business development. But I think we need to be careful in making sure that we respect the integrity of the comp plan until it's time to make modifications.
What do you mean by that?
When we next revise it, we have the opportunity to reclassify or re-guide land from the way that it's guided now. I think that's a very legitimate thing for us to do, because when I ran for office, I realized we haven't done a very good job of ensuring appropriate transition between intensity in high areas to low areas. We have a lot of cases where we have higher intensity uses coming right up against low intensity uses, and that isn't appropriate. And we've put in place things like the buffer yard ordinances to ensure that we get appropriate transitions when those kinds of things are called for within the comp plan. I would love to see more of a defined city center that gradually steps down in intensity. We don't have that. And I'm not sure that it's practical to create that, even when it is time to change the comp plan. But what we should do is figure out, if we're going to have a business park in this area, what requirements need to be in code to ensure that it's the best version of business park that we can reasonably expect. And so I kicked around a couple of ideas with Natalie over email around, can you have limitations on count of dock truck locations on the building so that you discourage, lots of shipments coming in and out continuously. Sounds like this version of the plan might do that, absent having a control. Could you have a guideline around how much warehousing space is allocatable within a particular building? I don't know if that's really feasible or not. It was another way to try to approach something like what the examples were, where you have more office, more manufacturing. So you're still moving product in and out, but it's not like you're shipping things out continuously. You're building for a day, you're shipping that day's product on 1 or 2 trucks. It might take deliveries a half a dozen times a day. That, I think, can work within the context of a county road corner with residential areas buffered, as code would require. That's my current perspective.
I particularly like that idea of the warehouse to office ratio, and that's something that I've certainly seen elsewhere before. I think that's an intriguing idea.
I think I could speak, I
Yes.
guess. You don't sound like a bad guy. It's like you're paddling up a river with a stick. These are warehouse buildings. They're not offices. All this, it's like I wore a different tie at the last council meeting, but I was still the same guy. And these plans have changed, and they haven't really changed that much. They look just like warehouses. In America, we have a lot of small towns being hoodwinked with promises of jobs and revenue. And I'd rather be broke and stay principled than have some promise. The unemployment rate in Corcoran is like 0. And so like I keep hearing about all the jobs that this will provide, and we're not a employment agency, and you can talk to the governor about the jobs. And it's frustrating because I've heard a lot cooperation with neighbors, and I haven't heard a single neighbor say they actually want the new version, or and to a certain extent it doesn't matter that much, because you know your neighbors didn't like it when you built your house. It's not all about what the neighbors think, but there's an expectation of zoning for offices. There's an expectation when it's very specific, in my opinion, and that this does not fit in the code. And I've talked to the landowner, and the landowner has been told by the builder that it's within code, and it's not within code. And I don't know how more clear that message could be to the builder, that this isn't what we're looking for. It's not within code. It's not within a mile of the code. And you know, if those buildings on 610 and 169 belong on interstates and state highways that are double laned with clover leaves, and this is just going to be in some neighborhood on the intersection of two county roads. And it's frustrating that you're right about the messages not being received, and I'm not sure I think you're not reading the message of what we're saying, and I don't know how much clearer we could be about that this doesn't belong here and it doesn't fit within the code.
Is it specifically the warehouse component that is the,
Yeah, and those aren't offices. Like if we had you know, if you have a giant building with an office in the corner, that is not an office.
right,
If you have even, at least two of the buildings that they showed have tons of semi-truck loading docks. And I think the Tesla one doesn't. But you drive by and it doesn't look like, you wouldn't drive by and say, hey, there's an office park. In America, it's that is a manufacturing, heavy industry park, not an office park. And so it's very clear to me, and I don't like the missed opportunity for the Corcoran landowners, but I think they've been had about somebody thinking they could do something on a piece of property that they can't.
Dean, did you have anything you wanted to say?
I'm understanding what everybody's saying. I spoke the last time to a business park and what I thought it would look like and such. Since then, I've read up, and this is kind of what's happening, but when I read into those documents and stuff, it is more warehouse and distribution. Like I said, the properties over off of Wedgwood and stuff like that, those are medical manufacturing, other types of manufacturing and those kind of things. And they don't look like four big buildings, excuse me. You know, what things would our planning department do to ensure that docks are limited and these don't turn into distribution centers, those kind of things. Those are all things I'm nervous about. I've looked at these a lot, and I look, and John, you've got a good point. Those big buildings belong next to 169, next to 610 interstate, cloverleaf entrances, those kind of things, and not county roads. When I drive around and go up 169, you've got a number of those tip-up buildings on the west side, up kind of kitty corner from the corn maze and stuff, and those are all frontaged and such with business office spaces, but then they are 30 foot tall, 35 feet tall, and then warehouse and docks in the back. something like this, a different layout that makes it so it's just not 4 big buildings is something that I was looking for or was hoping to see there as a business park. Maybe not quite as segmented off the way I was dreaming and thinking, but something like this, is there a way to turn it into 4 U-shaped buildings and all of the truck traffic and parking is, the parking is around the outside and those are office entrances, those kind of things, and then the back is more the pick up and drop off of raw materials and manufactured materials. Is there a way to change it from 4 long buildings to 4 U-shaped buildings or 4 corners with the middle open, just something different? I appreciate the water feature, the mitigation pond, whatever we talk about. I appreciate the path has been moved to the south side of that pond and not intruding into the neighborhood to the north and such. Something's got to go there, and I assume that Natalie, do you have thoughts on this as far as our definitions and those kinds of things as far as a business park and such? I assume your direction gave them this to bring to us, and this is it. So what can be done to get our heads on straight on what the ordinance is and those kind of things if we're that far off? I just jumped all over the place, I'm sorry. If it was easy, somebody else would be doing it, and I don't see anybody out there jumping up here, so.
So, yeah, to be fair, the applicant team have been in discussions with staff for a long time.
Yeah.
And I had multiple meetings with them last year. And while there were conversations early on that a distribution center couldn't go here, the impression that they had that warehousing to some extent would be appropriate with office and manufacturing, light manufacturing, did come from staff direction. So just to be careful with how we're saying someone's been duped, then that would have been me that duped the property owner and the developer, to be clear, and to own for that. But that we do say the language that was on the slide is what is in code. And it says the intent of this district is to provide for the establishment of campus developments with a variety of office, low-impact manufacturing, or assembly of a variety of products that create no exterior noise, glare, or fumes. So I don't think that it was just intended to be an office park. There was a carve-out specifically saying that the purpose of this district was to also allow for low-impact manufacturing and to have a variety of the buildings having office space, manufacturing space, warehousing space. So no, it wouldn't be warehousing as the primary use and only use, but having some kind of manufacturing component as well.
How would you describe this as low impact? On what basis?
So, to your point, it's relative, sure, and I get that. Heavy industry, we don't allow in the city.
They don't allow it anywhere.
Well,
There's
no,
no
that's not
heavy
true. If
industry.
you drive down Shakopee, there's
Plymouth
significant
has some.
heavy industry down in Shakopee on 169. Significant heavy industry that you can smell. There's significant impacts to you would not want to live next to it because you can smell the water treatment plant, you can smell the
paint, the plastic.
Yes, yeah. So when we're talking about something that does not have fumes, something that can be compatible because it doesn't have an exterior impact in terms of the smell is kind of the most obvious thing, and then glare or fumes.
And tall and has trucks driving in and out
Well,
all day?
the tallness of the building per our code, we allow a maximum principal building height of 45 feet. So that is something that we said when we drafted this ordinance, that would be considered low impact.
If I could, yeah, I heard you mention fumes and glare a couple of times. Would it be reasonable to say that the trucks servicing 232 loading docks would perhaps create fumes?
I mean, you can definitely say that autos in itself will create fumes, but that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about
No,
the low impact
not autos,
manufacturing or
trucks.
assembly. So it's
Trucks
talking
for the
about
loading
fumes
docks.
from the manufacturing or assembly process. It's not talking about the pollution that comes with transportation of vehicles.
But you were talking about the smells, right?
Yeah, but they've
And I would
already, they've
imagine
already
that
dropped
the
that number,
fumes
Mark, from,
from trucks servicing 232 loading docks.
It's not 232 loading docks. He heard you and he
Well-
brought that down to 80 loading docks. So that is a
But I do
significant
think-
fraction
80
of what
loading
is
docks
proposed. What?
total?
Yes.
That's what he had just had.
It was 15 and 20.
But that's
per
not
row.
in the packet, right?
Is 80
This
loading
is-
docks?
He hasn't submitted a packet yet.
this
Yeah.
isn't a packet
Is
yet.
80 loading
This
docks
is just a
small?
conversation,
Okay.
Mark.
Hey,
For that.
I can ask my
amount.
question.
Well, I know,
Guys,
I'm
guys,
just
guys,
saying.
I don't
guys.
need you telling me what I can ask.
One at a time. In my experience, that isn't necessarily a massive number for the amount of square, it's a lot of square footage. The 80, or whatever, the 60 to 80, that's, I think, an improvement from what we had seen initially. But it's kind of,
How many loading docks do office complexes have? Like when I went into my office today, how many loading docks do you think they had at my office with semis unloading?
I think I saw 3 or 4, because you've got a restaurant that's taking delivery.
Yeah.
When I was recently there in Wayzata. I think
Yeah.
And they're not, that's not capable of taking a large semi, so they actually take those, and I saw one pull up last time I
Yeah.
was eating at that restaurant on the
With
corner.
one loading
They
dock.
take the delivery on the street because they don't have a loading dock, but they're still taking deliveries.
Yes. So we have one at my office,
Mhm.
which is 3 stories and 15 tenants.
okay.
So if I'm looking at an office building and not a warehouse, you can count the number of semi-truck traffic that we have. Determine whether it's an office.
Right.
I don't know, I've spoken my piece about this in
no,
like
fair
3
enough.
meetings.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
just real quick. Natalie, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just thank you for the input back. So appreciate it.
And Mark, did you have anything to add?
I liked your thoughts, Dean, on, are there different form factors for the layout that might make it integrate better with the area? I don't know. John, you seem a little bit potentially flexible. Is there a form that you would prefer besides rectangle?
I think that if we have a problem in that office space, the amount of office space available in the metro is really high, and occupation rates are low, and the solution probably isn't to be flexible on our codes and standards, but to be flexible in the zoning and have something different there to give the landowners a break in wanting to sell their property. When we put this in there, it was like 8 years ago, before the crash of all office complexes. People don't go to work anymore. So we gotta adapt our code to what the reality is. And it's like we have 2 choices. We either have more houses or a mix of housing, like mixed commercial, light commercial and housing, or warehouses. And we have to make a choice. And I think this is miszoned. It might have been zoned properly at the time, before COVID, and people realized they could work at home.
Gotcha.
Mayor, if I could
Yeah.
make a comment/question to the point that Councilmember Bottom just made. Questions regarding appropriate zoning have put both the proposed developer and the property owner in a little bit of a pickle. That's why we're having the conversation, because they've invested significant time, energy, money, as we have as a city, moving forward, trying to develop a plan that will work for everybody based on decisions that have been made in the past, to your point.
They called me a long time ago and asked what I thought about this project. And I gave them my thoughts, like everyone else who asked me my thoughts on a project. And I get 1 of 5 votes. It's not our fault that they kept at it after reading the room for multiple months. That's why I say to people, come in and talk to council before you go down the route of expensive renderings and putting a bunch of time into it. That is why we have these preliminary meetings. This did not get a warm reception. They said it themselves. They've made small adjustments. And here we have a warehouse district that's slightly smaller than it used to be. And actually, they put the same amount of buildings on smaller amount of space, and who knows what's gonna happen with that woods and that other farm. I mean, putting more buildings on less space doesn't make it more attractive. And putting giant buildings with 85 loading docks on a county road, I mean, that, we were loud and clear from the beginning. And I don't know why they kept at it. It's like I said, rowing up a river with a stick. You gotta quit at some point.
I wasn't trying to attribute blame in that regard. I was trying to point out the point that you made when the zoning was decided on this, the world was a lot different. And so I think there's some important conversations that need to happen in order to ensure that those desired developments are going forward to meet current operating environment. So that was the point that I was trying to make. And I think our current definition of business park is doing the council and the potential clients a disservice. And so, because there's some specific language in there that the things that you're concerned about, valid concerns, especially with the change in the operating environment, are spelled out with a degree of, that could be interpreted as specificity. You know, when it identifies warehousing as something in a business park that we're saying we're desiring to attract folks, and then when they come in, we're telling them that's not what we want. Our zoning isn't aligned with our present perception of the operating environment.
I think it's a bad read when you think office/warehousing means you have a small office and the rest of the building is warehouses. It's not on us in an office park when you have a building that is going to be almost all open space and warehousing and storage. It should have been obvious that
A
it's
45-foot building is a pretty big building that's been approved by the current definition of the zone. I don't know that your building, is it the 3-story one? How tall is that one?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Where you work, and what is that? I don't know how tall that is. I don't know that that's even.
It's 3-story.
Yeah.
I mean, it's built a long time. I don't know how that all went, but it's.
But I think 45 feet might even exceed the size of what's got
In an
15
office,
users.
These
Yeah.
are warehouses.
Right.
Yeah, I think to me it'd be important to, it's hard to say when it's so kind of ambiguous in terms of what these tenants might actually be if approved, because you don't really know what that breakdown of office and warehouse is. I think the potential for the problem to come up, like you're saying, is certainly there. We just don't know really.
What are parameters like, to your point? I mean, what are the parameters around it? If it's an office park, is there and what happens if this all of a sudden becomes a warehouse? Will you
If it
shut it down? We'll be in courts for 10 years trying to figure it out.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Just to be clear, when a new use comes in, so if we do a speculative building, and then as a user comes in as guaranteed, there is a site plan process for anything that's a permitted use that isn't a single-family home. So there is a site plan process to ensure that if we put something in code in terms of a certain percentage, a certain ratio, we would have an opportunity to do that. So yes, if someone goes in without doing the site plan process, then that would be a reason to shut it down.
We've had people in our town in court for 10 years that have semi-trucks on their front yard. So who's to say, when a city approves something, when things go pear-shaped, the recourse is it's extensive and long, and this project lends it, I mean, on face value, I don't think it's gonna end up what we want in that area either. And it's another thing, like these things it's also one of the things that happens nationally is a city will get promised something and all of a sudden all of a sudden it isn't what it was promised and you're left with no recourse. Because we're a town, we don't have a huge budget to fight lawsuits against, I don't know.
I get what you're saying. Couple miscellaneous things that I just wanted to ask about. Mentioned a few times, I don't know if this is just in the previous narrative or if it's kind of still being discussed about the plan would lead me to believe it's still kind of the same understanding by the applicant that it's mentioned several times about the new infrastructure with 610 kind of unlocking this, and I just want to be clear that as of now there isn't additional infrastructure in Corcoran on the 610 project. So it would just be going to where it's going to connect on the kind of Maple Grove Corcoran side, and then we're hoping that we'll get some of that addressed in the future, but certainly far from a done deal in terms of getting anything more improved than what the current County Road 30 is. So I'd want to make sure that anything that could go there or does go there is aware of that and is building with that in mind, that that's what you'd be accessing onto, not necessarily an improved to the level of 610.
Understood. And by infrastructure,
Can you talk to me outside? We got people online.
understood, and by infrastructure, I had meant the road itself.
Gotcha.
So Highway 610 entering in, just right to the county road here, so.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
I'd love to have a conversation, more of a conversation related to what do we want to see, instead of this isn't what we want to see. I want to come out of this with something for not only them, but the landowners and the planning group. We're sending a different message, guys. I'm saying that. Hold out. This isn't what we want. What do we want? I've given examples of Wedgewood, of Opus, the Opus complex down in Hopkins, that's business part to me.
I agree with your characterizations. I think both of those, they're a little dated, but I
Very
would be
dated.
happy to see a
Very
contemporary version of that in Corcoran.
I'd love to see something more that complements what's gonna be going in across the street, 2 medical buildings, apartments, villas, townhouses, those kind of things. Something that complements that, not 4 large barns, pole sheds. That's what I see there.
Nothing wrong with
in
pole
this.
sheds.
On a farm,
I'm
nothing
just
wrong
kidding.
with that.
I know,
That's the stuff I'm saying, and I'd rather come out of this conversation without just slamming the door on somebody when it sounds like the application or what is wanting to go in here is something that is defined. I don't like the looks of those 4 buildings. It's nice that they're smaller, it's nice that we can put implications or restrictions in there, so many docks per square foot, those kind of things. I'm seeing them, and I haven't had a conversation individually with the developer and stuff, but I see 10,000, 20,000 square foot broken out individual businesses in there, and the front being offices, medical manufacturing, or manufacturing is a percentage. And then we keep saying warehouse, but it's not a warehouse, it is a supply station of stores for what's being manufactured there. We aren't, I don't think they're talking about a FedEx and Amazon, none of those things that have been said in these meetings previously. It is trying to get something out there to market and something out there that will help people that do go to work instead of work from home. I know a lot of companies that are pulling everybody back. They're seeing inefficiencies and stuff from people working at home, and unsuccessful events and such are happening, and everybody's got to get back together. It was a pandemic that's over. Let's get back to normal if we at all possible. That's what I'm saying, and I'd rather see something good come out of this meeting than just us just saying, nope, not what we want, but we don't share what we want.
I could get on board with something like you were talking, Dean, there, with some of the more broken up buildings, as opposed to the 4 big blocks, to kind of create some variety and some space for different types of offices, different types of businesses to go in there, as opposed to kind of what we're seeing here. I'd be more open to something like that.
My conversation when I started on 169, there's those tip-up buildings on the west side, north of, like I said, where the intersection where the corn maze used to be. I think that's almost done now, but those have got, oh my gosh, one is a door company, one is an appliance group, one is, I mean,
Brooklyn Park?
is that
Is that where you're talking
Brooklyn
about?
Park or Champlin? I
So
think I'm more
the corn maze
Champlin,
was in
Artie.
Brooklyn Park. That was one of the last things remaining in Brooklyn Park before it got fully developed. So I think we're talking about.
Just north of that and west, and I haven't been up there for a while. What's in the
It's
corn maze?
114th, it's
114th
114th
you.
and 169.
So I'm just saying, and that's the stuff I'm talking about is a garage door company, an appliance company, those kind of things. And yes, there's deliveries and pickups. When you look at Wedgwood, there's still medical device companies in there manufacturing life-saving stuff, and they have a warehouse in the back where supplies and everything it takes to manufacture those medical devices are delivered and then manufactured and turned around. Obviously, they have to ship them to hospitals, medical, whatever it takes to get them to the patient and such. That's the kind of warehouse. Is there a new word for that? Not necessarily warehouse?
Thank you.
Well, I would say that.
Help me, please.
Yeah,
I'm trying to help.
I would, yeah, and thank you. So
So I just wanted to pull this up real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt, but what you're talking about, this is what it looks like from a bird's eye view.
Yep.
So I think this is where we're struggling. It's like, it is all about what it looks like from the street view, which we don't have yet. But as far as the bird's eye view, this is what a business park would look like. So I think it's just something to keep in mind, is that
Thanks.
I think really what the concern is really what the architecture is gonna look like, which we can work through. We have controls
Yeah.
in place to really control that. So I think as far as anything you're going to see that comes in as a business park is going to look like 4 rectangles. But I think there's ways to.
Thank you for pulling that up. I'm not a fan of the way the tip-ups look. I'd
Right.
like more character, and we've
Yeah.
talked about that. We've talked about the stuff that's happening to their neighbor Maple Grove and everything they've got going on, and the facades and the fake windows and everything else in some of those tall buildings and stuff. I know that stuff we're gonna talk about and work on. It just, I'd rather see it a little bit more rural instead of this. John said it, I think, the best. Those 4 big buildings belong close to an interstate and an intersection that is Cloverleaf and such, and the access, they get off the main road and it's a mile and a half before they get to their destination through a very rural area that can change a lot over the next few years and such. Where this, to the south of this, I think it's still some rural ag farms and stuff, but it's right on the interstate. Or right on 169, if I remember right, and
It's
such.
on 2 county roads.
Yep.
There's the direct access, and then it has 169, similar to, they'll be on 2 county
But
roads.
it's way
with the access
closer
610.
to,
Yeah, and I think that's part, the reason why we identified this area is because we knew 610 was coming in and that this would be an area that can support industry, because we don't have a lot of area in the city that can. So I don't know how to get around that. So I think that's where,
Yeah.
if the discussion at this point is we don't want this as business park, then I think at this point we need to identify that we are intending as a city to rezone this property so that the property owners know how to proceed. Because at this point, everything I'm hearing is that we don't want this to be a business park. And so I don't know how to.
Why is that, why are you saying everything you're hearing is we don't want this to be a
Because what
business
you're saying is you
park?
want it to be office space and only office space. You don't want any warehousing.
No, we're
component.
saying this isn't a business, it's an office park.
I think he
I don't know
means
that
That's
that's,
what
this. Yeah.
You brought up a great example, something that's probably been hanging out up there probably 25, 30 years. And the way it used to be, I can argue, is that what we want now? Not so much, but we can make it look nice, and I'd like it more than just putting lipstick on a pig. I'd really like it to
Just
look,
to be clear, I'm
look
saying this
something
doesn't
better.
fit our zoning, and potentially we need to rezone if there's not a big market for office space. So, it's different than what you're saying,
I
and
have the least say in the matter here, but that is business park in nearly every community in the Twin Cities.
Okay.
And
good for them, it's not here.
Agreed,
It's
I'm not-
pretty
I'm
clear to
not-
me.
I'm not saying that what my opinion matters here, but I'm saying that is business park.
Half the
in-
building is semi-truck loading docks.
And. the
And they're on
subject site-
169.
The subject site is not zoned office park. So we keep saying office park, it's not office park, it's not zoned office park. We can read it again, it says warehousing and manufacturing.
I
It's
don't
not
think-
office park.
It does not say warehousing.
And when
It
you're
does.
saying
It
we
does.
don't,
It has a use for that.
Nowhere in it does it say that office space is required. Nowhere in there does it say that. It does say that it does say offices
I don't
are
think- I
permitted
disagree
use,
with
and it does say warehousing and officing can be a combined use. But it doesn't say that it has to be predominantly office over warehousing. And then I would say too, I think we're kind of confusing things if we're talking about warehousing as where something's stored. I know I've toured manufacturing facilities. A lot of the warehousing in the manufacturing space is pretty much the same area. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind is if we're talking about just the storage area, or if we're talking about the manufacturing area as well, because that would play into the ratios. So anyways, that was one clarification I wanted to make sure we're pointing out is that the manufacturing area pretty much bleeds into the warehousing area.
that is true.
Thank you.
and I would say the Wedgwood property that keeps being brought up, I think, this is a modern version of what that was when that was constructed. This is, buildings that are 100 to 150,000 square feet that have a blend of uses within them are the modern day Wedgwood of 2000. And there hasn't been a flex office building, your question of what those are called. Those would be
You're giving me new terminology. Thank you for helping me.
there hasn't been a flex office building developed in the Twin Cities probably since the early 2000s. And so these buildings can be demised and flexible for groups that have higher office counts, for groups that have higher manufacturing counts. And there is flexibility to it. And the part that I think the crucial distinction of what Councilmember Bodema is saying is that he doesn't believe that the zoning code allows for what we're proposing, but what I'm hearing is that nearly the rest of the room does. And that's why I'm still here.
Do you really hear that? You
That's
really
what
hear
I'm
that?
saying.
That's what a couple of the council members are
You're
saying,
hearing
and
that our
that's what the
code
staff
allows
is
what you're
saying.
trying to do.
That's what the staff is
Well,
saying.
I've told you multiple times, I'm one of 5 votes.
Mm-hmm.
We get to vote. And do you think that fits the code?
No, I'm somewhere, I think, in between you and Jeremy here.
And do you think it fits the code?
No.
Do you think it fits the code?
I'm deferring to our planning group
So three
and
sit-
what they're defining. So yes, it fits the code. I just not a fan of the 4 big buildings.
I guess he's saying somewhere like your use fits the code, but your actual project doesn't fit the code. So you're hearing that I'm the only one that is against it, but I hear 4 people say they're not in favor of your project and your project doesn't fit the code.
Mark?
And if I could, I just don't think that it's the role of city council to design their project for them. I think that's for them to do and to bring it forth, and then we vote on that project. Talking about changing rectangular buildings into curved buildings, I don't think that that is our role, nor should it be our role. That's the role of the property designer.
So I would say at this point, I need to understand how to proceed, because right now, the way our code is written, this is something that could come in tomorrow, and we would need to approve it if there was no variances requested. So if
That's
we're.
not true, Natalie.
Yes, it is.
We approve it as council. You can recommend that it gets approved.
If it's a permitted use and it fits
It's
the
not.
standards in
We're
our
saying it
code
doesn't fit.
without a variance.
We are
We'd have
saying-
to sort that out, but yeah.
4 of us say it doesn't, and we get the votes. So you might recommend that it gets passed, but we don't have to pass something because you
Regardless, I
recommend
don't
it.
know how to tell them, I don't know how to tell anyone how to come in under the standard. So if we don't like the business park district as it's written right now, we either need to change the district or rezone
I
the property,
disagree
is
with
what
that.
I'm asking for.
I
I'm
dis-
asking for guidance on
We
how
might
I'm
need
supposed
to
to tell the
clarify,
property
but
owner to move
we might
forward.
need to clarify.
You can't have.
Because we disagree on the reading of it.
And that, if
I'm
I could
firm in
react-
my reading of it.
If I could, I think that's a key, I've got that, you gotta give me back to, I think that's a key point that you bring up, Councilmember Bottom, is that because there's a disagreement on it, I would defer, and I don't have our attorney here in order to get his interpretation of it, but at the very least, I think we can agree that there isn't clarity to the point that everybody agrees on what it communicates, and that's problematic. And so it's beneficial for us in order to define the terms and expectations, so everybody has a similar understanding. And that's probably some work that we need to do in order to provide that to the property owners and to any potential future developers and the current developer. I absolutely agree with you that there's not agreement, and it should be very clear so that all the council members have the same interpretation and staff are aligned with that understanding so we can communicate to property owners and developers clearly. And we currently can't do that. So we need some help with that.
Could you bring the code back up?
I will.
Thank you. So I'm hearing a tension between the use within the facility and the look of the facility. My reading of code is it is intended to allow manufacturing and assembly, which means there has to be material brought to the site. You can't assemble nothing and end up with something. So by virtue of the kinds of businesses that this is intended to allow, there will be a warehouse element to the use, unless we want to not allow manufacturing. But that puts us into the problem that John highlighted earlier, where pure office is not in demand. What's in demand is places where people have to come together to make something physical currently. Maybe that'll change at some point, but there appears to be a market for that now. So if we can agree on the premise that the code allows material to come into the site, there's going to be some mechanism for doing that, whether it's kids walking up with Red Ryder wagons or dock trucks. How many we can control. We've talked about it's a possibility to have requirements we put in place on the project or within code to ensure we keep that at a reasonable number. What I'm hearing a lot of is we don't like the look of the building, and I understand the basis for that. That's more of an architectural standard that I think we could try to design what we would expect a business park to include. Maybe that means shorter walls. Maybe it means more than 4 sides. We could talk through what concepts might work there. But unless we want to convert this to housing, which I wouldn't support, given what we're going to talk about in the finance review and the full meeting, I think we need to clarify the interpretations that we have here and figure out what will square the circle of appearance versus use.
I agree with that. That's kind of what Jay was saying, I think. I agree, that's something we need to do, absolutely. In terms of feedback to the developer. I don't know how much that helps right now, but it's certainly something we need to do sooner than later.
I'd be happy to offer some ideas too. I mean,
Great.
there have been some that have been brought up. And the reason that I'm here is because our team, our legal team believes in full force that this complies. So when I'm here to be talking about, is there a maximum number of dock doors that we can place on these buildings? Is there a maximum height of these buildings that we can agree to soften? I mean, these aren't proposed at 45 feet. But
What are
that's
they
the
proposed
code-
at?
They're probably 32 clear, 36 or 37 to the parapet. One thing I've done in other communities is we have talked about an pre-agreed upon balance of office, warehouse, and manufacturing within the buildings. We have to make sure that that's market receptive, but there is a certain extent that we could be comfortable with in agreeing to that. Those are examples of negotiations I've had in other communities in these sorts of conversations. It's been dock doors, height of building, and what goes on inside the building.
Have you done any, what Councilmember Lanterman described was like petite buildings, so to take this large building and change it into one large building into 4 smaller buildings, so it's more aesthetically pleasing and less,
So the
have you done that?
The smallest building that United Properties has developed in recent years is 96,000 square feet. Because anything below that, the economies of scale just don't work.
To clarify, you said 85 truck docks, right? Do I have that number correct?
Roughly, sure, yes.
Roughly. Would the trucks servicing those truck docks create either noise, glare, or fumes?
So those items are studied in our environmental review, which is what our next step in this process would be.
Okay, but do trucks generally create noise, glare, and fumes?
I
That
think
just
it's up to
yes or no?
interpretation. I mean, this isn't a litigation here.
But you brought up your legal team, so I want to make sure that I understand.
Yes. We
Did-
feel very confident in the basis and the reason why I'm here tonight.
Okay, but that's why I'm confused. Do trucks that service 85 truck docks, would those trucks create noise, glare, or fumes?
Not beyond the legal levels in Minnesota.
But that's not what the code says.
This is
So
pretty
do they, would the,
unprofessional.
it's just a yes or no. Would those trucks create noise, glare, or fumes? Yes or no?
Not associated with low impact
Just,
manufacturing.
it's just yes or no. Are the trucks servicing 85 truck docks, will those trucks create noise, glare, or fumes? Yes or no?
I think it's how you look at the project.
He's trying to create.
So you don't want to
standing-
answer.
I've tried, sir.
It's just a yes or
This is
no.
pretty difficult to stand up here in front of, to be treated like that, the way that you have from the moment.
I'm
I've been
asking
up
you a
here.
question.
Going back to
85
what-
trucks, do they create noise, glare, or fumes? Yes or no?
Vehicles, cars, yes, this is life, These buildings are.
So
the
that's a
heart-
yes.
These buildings are the heart and soul of the manufacturing base in the United States. They produce the GDP that we all are, here that, the United States needs. This is really straightforward, guys. This is business park product. We can talk about some of the restrictions and be professional about it, please.
But you
And if
say,
we'd like to talk about.
you say straightforward, but you won't say yes or no.
Connor, if you want to finish.
Your Mustang emits,
Mm-hmm.
I know, I gotta hold on.
Connor, if you wanted to finish, you can.
I can't.
Okay.
I really can't.
Good job, Connor. You tried. You guys obviously do not want in
I think next steps should be reviewing with Baines some of the definitional items and making sure that.
So my counsel, my question for council would be, would you want to do that as a work session, or would you want to do that as a scheduled discussion?
I'm open to either.
I think it might be more beneficial for us to do it as a scheduled discussion.
I'd rather, yes.
So I will look at the schedule and come up with a proposal. I don't want to have it at this moment, because I need to talk, ensure I understand when Mr. Thames is available.
And then depending on that, I would keep in mind that those 3 areas that, and maybe we look up, try to come up with some other ideas for
So to confirm the 3 areas, I've got dock doors,
building
max
height
loading,
and
max height
percentage of
building,
office
and then
warehouse.
ratios.
ratio. And I think I could.
Are there any other things you'd like me to make sure that we touch on as staff prepares for that?
Not off the top of my
What's
head.
the list?
Currently, what was discussed was, would there be a maximum number of dock doors on any type of proposal in the business park?
Is there a dock doors per like square feet? It's got to be kind of a relative,
Okay, so per square feet.
or per some metric. We're just thinking aloud here.
So we can, I don't know what metrics would be the standard for the industry. So we could look at what other, have there been other precedents set to look at some of these?
We don't have to be
issues?
afraid to have a higher standard or a different standard here, but we can look at. I'd be, if not, I'd be willing to look at a building, an office manufacturing building with less loading docks.
It would be
One of the
helpful.
buildings actually doesn't have that many loading docks that they showed us if you look at from the sky. So there is one that
They all have the same.
no, I didn't see it, but I'm open to being wrong about it.
I think it would be helpful too, is if there are precedents that council gravitates towards, so that staff can do some research on what are the parameters of those precedents, that you go, yep, this is something that we want to see in the community, wherever it might be. That would be helpful. This is the side, if you could provide me that feedback so I can get it to staff, that would be really helpful. So we ensure that we're making the best use of our time in terms of refining council's desire.
What I've seen work well, when I worked in a company that served pharma, they wanted to have segregated arrival and departure, so you wouldn't have the same material going in and out of the same door. And so it was important to have multiple entry points. Intuitively, to me, it would make sense to allow at least 2 per bay. And if you have a large vendor who's going to take up, 3 bays, they could potentially have more than 2, obviously. I would see that as being very acceptable.
I would suggest that we limit the amount of staff time that goes into these projects until there's some sort of feel about what the council might think about it. It's obvious that staff differs from our opinion on this, and you guys have a lot of vested time and effort into that, and I feel like we're disrespecting that a little bit. So it would be, we've had a couple of them that have went way down the road, and the council has reeled them back. And I think it would be helpful to have check-ins, and especially the napkin stuff, like where somebody says, I'm thinking of doing this, what do you guys think? And if there's not like a positive opinion about it, like have more, like read the room and check in about where we might think, because they're 4 designs into this, and we're still in the kind of the same spot we were at the first design.
I think at the heart of the challenge, another point of the discussion when we come back, is we really need to revisit and clarify council's desires for permitted uses in business parks, because that's really, I think, at the heart of this discussion is the interpretation and understanding of permitted uses. So for us to get a very clear understanding, whether that's through ratios of office to warehouse space or those other types of things, so then staff can provide feedback to interested parties that aligns with council desires. Right now, they have been moving in a direction that they feel like they've been doing that. And so, based on the decisions and the feedback that council has made previously in terms of defining the code with permitted uses, but there's clearly a difference in understanding of what those clarity on the permitted uses are. And so getting a little bit more granular maybe, whether that's through ratios or eliminating permitted uses, adding permitted uses that maybe haven't been considered, I think that could be really helpful for staff to provide that kind of feedback. So we're only bringing those things forward. We're not wasting developers' time. We're not wasting your time, because time is money.
I think this is the fourth round of giving the same feedback. I don't know, you know.
Right, but I think Jay is trying to say what we could do to potentially get it a step forward.
Yeah, I think clarity would be, clarity is always helpful. I also don't, yeah, we want to be sort of a little bit less specific to be open to creativity, you know, and we don't want to design everything from a council level. So I just want to be, you try to design a code with some variation for flexibility. So, whatever.
Yeah, I think this one needs a little more, needs to be fleshed out a little bit more, just because.
If there's some particular desires with the lone business park in the community, we probably should have some specificity to it.
So we have 15 minutes left. Can't course correct now, but I just want to give a self-assessment. I don't think we did well in this meeting. I don't think we got into enough of the tactical policy-making elements to help shape the next direction. And while it's maybe satisfying to vent some spleen when you're frustrated, we can't continue to conduct ourselves this way when we're trying to set code.
Thanks, Mom.
You're welcome, Mark.
Guys, come on. It's not helpful. Okay, is there anything else?
Yeah, if I can say, Natalie, thank you. I've been sitting here staring at the ordinance and stuff, and right now, just a definition of permitted uses. You know, John, you talk about creativity, those kind of things. I'm counting 18 different possibilities, from banks and savings and loans to office warehouse to everything else. There's like 6 there, and then individual ones here. It's I can understand what's happened so far.
I mean, it's important in the code that it says variety, and it also says,
yeah, when you look at
limited
it now,
amount developments will provide a number of amenities, including architectural controls, landscaping, and, I mean, I guess I didn't see any of that.
well, and that's why
But obviously
saying-
there's a difference. Like, to me, it's clear, but it's not to everybody. So we do need, clarity is important.
For sure. Does that make sense?
Yep, that's helpful. I think you feel the step. Do we have enough feedback? Heather? Do you need anything else?
I have enough for now, yes.
Good enough. Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the work session.
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.